Still a little shaken up from this. I live in the outskirts of one of the largest cities in the Northeast, in a quiet section of a city with a small town feel. I go to the gym in the suburbs and was headed home after a pretty intense workout. Just ready to get home, pet my dog, and take a much needed shower. Now, to get back into the section of the city from the suburbs, there's this old 4-lane bridge that leads into a few of the main streets of the neighborhood. The lanes aren't separated by markings, but there are signs on the bridge, and everyone respects the 2 cars to a lane policy. As I was driving across the bridge, I stayed in the right lane to go straight across, as the left lane is a turn lane. As I reached the end of the lane, I noticed that the car at the end was over into my lane, about a foot, and I did my best to cut around it. One of my tires ended up a bit on the sidewalk as I made my way into my lane. I glanced over at this guy, didn't flip him off or act aggressively, but I'm sure my face expressed my thought of, "What the fuck are you doing?" The light turned green, and I went straight across. I noticed the car that had been blocking my lane, despite being in the turning lane, went straight as well. Looking at my rearview mirror, I could see an illuminated Uber light in his windshield. I continued up the semi-residential street, stopping at each stop sign on the way up, this car remaining behind me the whole way. As I was already thinking, this guy doesn't know how to drive, I kept an eye on my rearview mirror as I approached the main street in the area. As I was waiting at the light, I noticed that this guy had turned off his Uber light, and something in me realized that something was wrong. I'm not sure what it was, but the Uber light gave me some sort of comfort that this guy was working, and his conscious act of turning it off made me feel uneasy. As I turned onto the main street, I made the first left turn I could, and the Uber made the turn behind me. I was now on a residential street, but as I knew the area, I drove at a conscious pace, making a couple turns, heading towards the highway. The Uber pursued, his bumper about a foot and a half from mine. Halfway down the residential street, there was no doubt in my mind that I was being pursued. Now, despite me having a very buttoned-up office job and a soft-spoken personality, I don't necessarily think that I'm a prime target for being chased. I'm a big guy. I'm between 6'5" and 6'6", a little under 220 pounds, muscular, and have a ton of tattoos. I'm sure this guy saw me as I pulled up next to him on the bridge, and from my glance at him, he looked older and much smaller than myself. While the thought of pulling over and escalating things did cross my mind, with the rate of gun crime in my city, that thought was gone as soon as it came. All I could focus on was getting to a safe place and making sure this maniac didn't find out where I lived. As I turned onto the highway, he followed again, cutting across several lanes and accelerating to catch up to me. I made the first right I was able to, then led him down a winding maze of back streets, his car inches away from my bumper the entire time. I wasn't paying attention to the one-ways, stop signs, or speed limits at this point. I just knew I needed to get away. All the while, the Uber followed, matching my speed and taking every sharp turn that I did through the maze of streets. Realizing that I needed to get back on a more populated area in case this guy decided to shoot me or hit my car, I headed back in the direction of the main street, spotting on the corner of my eye a parking lot of fast food restaurants that provided a shortcut to the main road. I blasted through that parking lot, the man speeding in after me, and I felt hopeless. If this guy was willing to follow me through all that, he wouldn't stop until he caught me. I weighed my options as I turned onto the main street. The police department was about a 10-minute drive away, but there were several lights and crosswalks between myself and safety. I decided I would head back through the streets in the direction, try my best to lose him as I went. I didn't want to give this guy an opportunity to get out of his car at a red light and hurt me in some way. I had to head in that direction, and I prayed that I didn't hit any red lights. As I rounded the corner of the parking lot, my worst case scenario was revealed. a red light with a car already stopped with opposing traffic. I drove opposite on one way to the left with my car ready to make a turn. I know it was irresponsible, but I didn't hesitate. I merged into oncoming lanes and made a left going down the wrong way down a one-way residential street. A few beeps from other cars around me rang out, but I didn't care. I just prayed that I had made an irresponsible enough maneuver to throw this guy off and created enough confusion to get away. I looked in my rear view and didn't see headlights. I drove to the end of the block of the one-way and made a few random turns down side streets, pulling into the parking lot of an apartment complex and turning my car off. My adrenaline was winding down and I couldn't stop shaking. I laid my seat all the way back and called the police non-emergency line. The lady who answered the phone was entirely unhelpful and directed me to call 911. All I had was a brief description of the car and guy whose face I could not recall well. The police told me that they were just going to write it up as a disturbance. They told me to drive home as some time had passed between the chase ending and them getting to me. Being the ever paranoid person I am, I parked several blocks down from my house, changed my clothes in my car, put on a hat, and walked home, on the lookout for this guy in his car the whole way. I thought I saw his car turn left down another block as I walked, but I told myself that even if it was him, he wouldn't be able to recognize me outside my car. Now that I'm home typing this out, my large dog next to me and a drink in my hand, I feel helpless. I'm scared to drive my car in the city and run into this crazy person, scared of what he might do to me. I'm worried this guy will drive around and see my car, find out where I live, and try to come after me or my family in some way. I've never felt this vulnerable before in my entire life. I've never considered purchasing a weapon, but this encounter is making me consider it. All I can do is try to move on and hope that he doesn't get any rides in this area. So deranged Uber driver who chased me through the back streets of my city because he didn't understand traffic patterns. Let's not meet. Something weird happened on a walk. Tonight, I was on a walk with my dog. Same routine, same time. I was walking my normal path, and this part of the walk happens to be the darkest part. There's an alley on the left that has absolutely no light. My dog was suddenly on high alert and was barking like crazy. I had my headphones on, but I knew something was wrong, and I looked to the alley but didn't see anything at first. When my eyes adjusted, I saw a very tall and skinny man standing there. He didn't move, he was just facing me and staring from what I could tell. He was all in black. His pants and shirt were long, which is weird because it's been 90 to 100 all week. Not to mention, it's 10 p.m. at night and this man's wearing a giant black sun hat. I kind of froze and went, pretty loudly as I turned my headphones off so I could listen in. The man standing there says nothing, and so I'm turning towards him, but walking forward. After a second of him being silent and me trying to walk away, kind of chalking it up as creepy but harmless, he starts to follow me. This man follows me for about 2 to 3 minutes, saying absolutely nothing, just staring at me. When I felt like I could finally speak, I yelled out, "My dog's gonna fucking bite you." That seemed to scare him a bit, because after that he slowly followed me for about 30 seconds more. Then he slowly went onto a sidewalk and went a different way. When he turned around to get away, he had a huge backpack on. It was extremely full. I have a really uneasy feeling about this. I go on this path almost every night, and this man just so happened to be standing there in the darkest alley. There's a missing woman 3 minutes away from me, and it's alleged that she was assaulted a few days prior to her sudden disappearance. Should I report this to the non-emergency line? I don't know where to go from here. I'm very freaked out. This is a long story, so stick with me. I'm a 23-year-old female, and I'm a bartender. I have some stories where I've been generally scared for my life, but this has got to be the worst. I'm working a double at the restaurant. Around 11 a.m., a delivery man comes in with a package that I needed to sign for. He comes. I sign for the package and tell him to have a good day with a smile. I continue my shift per usual. This was a Friday or Saturday. I can't remember. But later on, we got busy. The restaurant and parking lot are full. I see a lot of different people daily, plus seeing someone for the second time ever, out of their uniform. You may not recognize them. FedEx driver comes and sits at the bar. I don't remember him from the 25-second interaction we had that morning. I start talking to him as I do all my customers. I get him a drink, appetizer, another drink, entree, etc. Our conversation started. How long have you worked here? A few years. I've worked my way up. How do you like it here? Just a regular conversation with bar guests. It slowly became not so regular. He asked if I had a boyfriend. I said yes. He would change the subject and then go back, complimenting me, saying how beautiful I was every few minutes. Can I have your number? No, I don't think my boyfriend would appreciate that. Okay, what's your last name? We could be Facebook friends. All annoying, but normal interactions I've had with men in this industry. He started to become really pushy over time, pressing for my phone number or social media. I continue to politely decline and laugh it off. He then tells me, I actually came this morning to drop off a package with FedEx. You signed for it. I came back just for you. I smile, continue with my stupid customer service. Oh yeah, I remember you. And then smile and laugh it off. I even stepped in the back to vent to my manager at this point about how he was extra pushy and uncomfortable. Flash forward about an hour. He pays his tab and leaves. I'm just glad he's gone at this point. We'll say as a guess, it was about 7 p.m. when he leaves. We are still busy and we close at 10 p.m. We finish dinner service. Customers slowly start to leave and the restaurant is finally empty. I've been cleaning for a while and I'm finally finishing up. It's about 10:30 p.m. at this point. I'm cleaning the bar. I look up. The whole front of the restaurant that is facing me consists of a large window that faces a parking lot, and I see one car in the parking lot. I notice that it's the delivery driver guest from earlier. He is standing outside the car, walking around and seeming like he's cleaning the back seat out. Door opens, and he's leaning in and out with a bag. As soon as I realized it was him who left almost 4 hours ago, my heart sank. Why was he still here? Why was he cleaning the back seat out? I freak. My manager and I are the only people left at the restaurant at this point. It's almost 11. I run to her and tell her everything about how he came back just for me and about how he had seemingly left 4 hours ago. And I made her come from the back of the restaurant to behind the bar up front so she could see him in the parking lot. She says she's going to call the police. At this point, my boyfriend and I had an apartment literally 5 minutes away from the restaurant. I told her not to worry about it. I'll just call my boyfriend to come get me. I did just that. But my boyfriend could immediately tell something was wrong. And when I'm scared or anxious, I ramble. So I gave him a quick debriefing of what's going on. He said that he'll be there soon and hung up. My manager made me sit in the office until he got there, so I didn't see this go down. All I remember is my boyfriend coming into the restaurant to get me, walking me to the car through the back door, and getting me home. My boyfriend, who is very confrontational and protective, later tells me that he pulled into the parking lot to see a FedEx driver sitting in his driver's seat of his car. My boyfriend walked up to the car and knocked on the window for him to roll it down. He does, and my boyfriend tells him something along the lines of, "You need to get out of here." This is where the scariest thing happens. The dude responded to him in a different language, mumbling and acting like he didn't speak English. My boyfriend said something like, I know you speak English. You've been talking to my girlfriend all night, and you need to get out of here. The dude continued rambling in a different language until my boyfriend raised his voice and basically said, "You have 15 seconds before I pull you out of this car, and you never leave this parking lot," before the guy finally put the car in drive and sped off. I was on edge for weeks after this interaction, and have considered switching jobs. Why was he still sitting in the parking lot that long after we closed, and hours after cashing out his tab? And why was he cleaning out the back seat? To the creepy bar guest, delivery driver, let's never meet again. This happened 6 or 7 years ago now. I played soccer for 1 year in community college after high school. I knew this guy because he worked for the athletics department. He was another student. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I had a 1 hour gap between classes. This guy noticed me in the library, asked what I was doing there, and I told him I had an hour-long gap, and he started coming regularly to hang out. I didn't mind because he seemed like a normal guy. He wasn't waiting for anything, but he just wanted to hang out. He brought me little gifts a few times, like chocolate and stuff. He was being a little too sweet for someone I barely knew. I just didn't think about the red flags. With the gifts, I remember he always downplayed it. He'd be like, "They had an extra Kit Kat bar today in the office. Do you want some?" He never said that he purposely bought the Kit Kat for me. I know a lot more about boys now than I knew back then. I think he knew that buying me gifts would be too much, but he still wanted to do it without doing it. The soccer season for us ended before Thanksgiving. The only teams that kept playing after that were going to the playoffs, not us. After Thanksgiving, we had finals. In that brief period after soccer season and before Thanksgiving, he asked me about my classes for the second semester. To be honest, I hadn't been super organized with course registration, and honestly, I didn't know. Also, the counselors were completely useless. I didn't tell him that, but I remember saying I didn't want to have another gap hour like this because it wasted so much time. I don't think he was happy to hear that. He also asked if I would play another season, and I said no to that. I needed to manage my time better, and playing soccer every day was not helping. I think my mistake was that I just said too much and unfiltered. I used to do that a lot back then, saying too much without thinking about how it can affect other people's feelings. That was on the last Thursday before Thanksgiving, so no more 1 hour gaps to hang out anymore. We had Thanksgiving break, we took finals, and we had winter break. Everything was great. Winter break was when all the real problems started. In the mornings, this guy would literally show up outside my house while sitting in his car. The first time I didn't believe it was actually him. The second time I checked, and it was. By then, it was really clear that we both knew what was going on. He was stalking me, and that wasn't all. I posted on my Instagram stories sometimes about places where I was. This guy literally showed up there several times, like girly stores at the mall where he had no business being. He did lots of things like that. He also started pointing his phone at me like he was taking pictures. That was even weirder. I basically stopped using social media after this. After winter break, this continued. When my parents were at work, this guy came during afternoons too. I called the cops a few times. They went and tried to talk to him, but he basically told them that he wasn't going to talk, and that was that. I think the cops wanted to help, but they could never do anything about it because he was careful not to break the law. Like, he didn't trespass, he didn't make threats, he didn't show weapons. I have no idea what he's doing now. My guess is that he gave up. Maybe his little obsession kind of became old and he found other things to pay more attention to. At least I hope so. but if he still comes by, I have no idea. I think the most challenging thing is that I couldn't tell my parents, since I know they would completely freak out. Several years ago, I had a very quick trip to Denver planned to visit a friend before she moved away. I was young, broke, and working a crappy entry-level job, so it was the best I could do with my one day off. I went straight from work to the airport and got into DIA around 11 p.m. I was bunking on the couch of an old college friend, and they lived about 30 to 40 minutes away from the airport. Fortunately, the light rail recently extended out to the airport, and my friend lived near the light rail line. I had taken the light rail often when living in Denver myself, but was not too familiar with the newer additions. I barely made it to the train before setting off, grateful to not have to wait around for another half hour at that time of night. It was nearing midnight when the train pulled into a brightly lit Union Station. I looked around for my connection, but it was nowhere to be found, not realizing that the connecting line was not there. Fortunately, I was able to flag down security, and they pointed me in the right direction. A few blocks away, there was another brightly lit station, separated by roughly 200 yards. Unlike the stations, there were hardly any lights, just some lights spilling in from either side where the train platform stood. I was only traveling with a backpack, so I was able to move quickly, moving out of the Union Station and towards the other platform, hoping that I was going to make my next train. As I got further away from the station, my eyes adjusted to the darkness. I noted a large figure standing in the middle of the sidewalk ahead of me. I quickly gauged my surroundings and realized there were no other paths unless I walked in the road. I decided to keep on the path and do my best to come across with a "I see you and I'm not scared" attitude. As I drew closer, I could make out a tall, muscular man, probably in his 20s or 30s. As I got closer, I made eye contact to let him know that I recognized his presence, and he was already staring right at me, mumbling to himself. As I passed by him, I could hear what he was mumbling. He was not speaking to me, but instead he was speaking about me. And as I walked past him, he began to follow me. I began to walk fast, and he began to walk faster. All the while, he was saying things like, "Oh, look at that body. She's so fine. I want to feel that body," along with other sexual and crude comments about me, all being muttered to himself. The second station was still another 100 yards or so away, and there was nowhere I could go in between. I pulled out my cell phone and rang my dad, desperate for him to answer. The call went to voicemail, but I pretended he had picked up. As soon as I began talking, the man spoke to me for the first time and said, "Oh girl, I didn't mean you no harm," and the footsteps faded. I kept up the fake conversation for a moment longer before looking back, and he was nowhere to be found. Like I mentioned previously, I looked around for places I could escape and couldn't find any. I am confident with his size, if he had done anything, I wouldn't have stood a chance. I burst into the light of the station, barely made my train, and ultimately missed my stop because I was so shaken up and had to ride the train back around. I finally rested my head on the pillow in my friend's house around 2 a.m., never to travel alone at night. And whoever the disappearing man in the street was, let's never meet again. I'm a 20-year-old female. I have a stalker, 20 or 21-year-old male. So this started about 2 or 3 months ago. I work in an art store and we do a little of everything, helping customers, cleaning, stocking shelves, etc. One day this guy came in asking for some help as he had never really took up art before. Lucky me, I was chosen to help this guy. We talked for a bit and I asked him what he wants to learn, what medium he wants to use and such. He said he's into sketching at the moment and wants to expand his horizon. I say cool, and I give him a few directions. Somehow it comes up that I'm also an artist, and he's really interested. He asked me if I can help him with his art, which caught me off guard because, huh? I said I'm not professional, and I'm not interested in teaching. He took it well, and off he went. The next week he returns and specifically asked for me. He said he brought a sketchbook this time. I found this odd because I don't remember agreeing to help. He shows me some of his sketches, and I notice he only draws K-pop singers, and I realize one of them is a member from BTS, and I pointed it out. I don't listen to them. He starts raving about BTS and K-pop and the like. Apparently, I hit a sweet spot for him, because nobody likes K-pop and I knew about it. Anyway, he starts coming in every few days, and at that point, I was really disturbed by him. I had also found out that he had learned what my work schedule was, my birthday, my name, and how old I am. I only found this out because of a few encounters with said customer. One day I clock into work, and I see him waiting in the stairs for me. He acts all surprised. Whoa, I didn't know you were coming in so early. I could tell he was lying because he was sweating really badly and couldn't look me in my face. It creeped me out so much. 2. On my birthday, he came up to me at the exact time I'm supposed to start my shift and gave me a gift and a note. He said he drew me a member of the band and gave me a birthday card. He told me that he wanted to give me something a day before my birthday because he knew I wouldn't be coming in the day of. Mind you, I never told him my birthday. He probably overheard me talking about it with one of my coworkers, and that really creeped me out. I had insane amounts of anxiety and had to muster up the courage to act like I wasn't completely put off by this. After he walked away, I looked at the note that he had wrote me. Happy 20th birthday. Keep making people happy and being so kind. P.S. I'm not a paper thief, so you can have this back. Huh? Paper thief? And then I realized the paper the note was written on was a piece of garbage I threw away months ago. He picked it up from the trash to return it to me? That made my blood run cold. He came in and asked for help like usual. He brought up buying something for kids, and because of this, I wanted to know if there was a wife or something involved. I asked, "Oh, how old are your kids?" Obviously, I also had a note to give him age-appropriate supplies. He started freaking out, saying, "They aren't my kids. I don't have kids. I'm not married." And started asking me if I was married. I said I'm not married, but I'm in a committed relationship and have been for 5 years. A lie. He got very disappointed and walked off. I thought maybe that was it. He didn't come in for 2 weeks, and I was overjoyed until today. He came up to me during work while I was busy and asked for help. He asked me where I was for 2 weeks, which really confused me, but also disturbed me deeply. I tried my best not to interact with him and told my coworker to take over for me while I hid in the back. She agrees and keeps him busy, and then he just ends up leaving. After he left, she called me over and said I can come out. I asked her, did he ask anything about me? She looked at me with a concerned look and said, yeah, he did. He asked why you were so busy all of a sudden and when you'll come back out, if you work tomorrow. I'm riddled with anxiety and it's making me really anxious at work because I'm afraid to see him. Thankfully, he hasn't done anything physical to me, but put a lot of mental strain on me. I don't want to quit because I love my job and my coworkers. Also, very important to mention, after the birthday incident, the moment he left, I went up to management and told them everything about him, that he creeps me out and I feel unsafe. My manager said, it's totally legitimate to go after a girl like you. That's what men would do back in the day. You should feel flattered. And the coworker said, it's all because women wear little clothes nowadays. It makes men act up. I have to conform to a dress code. I haven't even shown as much as a shoulder. I told my parents and friends, and they're all on my side and think he's a complete weirdo. Honestly, I don't know what to do about it. It's really creepy, and I'm scared to encounter him again. Update. Thank you so much for your advice and comments. It felt so validating to see that I'm not alone in experiencing such things, even if some people don't consider this extreme. I also talked to my dad about it, and he really came around and understood me. He asked me if this guy scares me, and I responded yes. He said that's all he needs to know, that he'll come over there himself if this guy doesn't stop hanging around the store. The guy came in again today, but right before I had to clock out. I tried to ignore him and was mostly successful as my coworker took over for me. He came in asking about paintbrushes and asked which one to get. My coworker offered him all kinds and he came up to me and said, "Hey, which one do you think I should get?" Again, I tried pretending like he wasn't there, but I couldn't escape to the storage room as it was already locked and it was beyond our closing time. I said, "Hey, what kind of paints do you use?" As there's different brushes for different paints. He replies with, "Oh, well, I don't have any paints, and I don't paint." And it clicked in my head that it seems like he just wanted an excuse to see me. My coworker was very confused and asked him in response, "I just advised you on what to get. I don't see why you need to ask her." And I shit you not, this freak says, "Oh well, I know her better, and we have a connection." I was mortified by what he said. I was about to clock out, and I managed to take a sneaky photo of him. My mom came to pick me up because she was worried that he may try to follow me home if I walked. After I get home, I get a message from my coworker, younger than the one I usually work with. This is a morning shift coworker, and she asked me all kinds of questions. "Hey, I noticed something was very off about you when you were about to close. Was that guy someone you know?" And I just couldn't contain it. I let out everything and told her. She sent me a voice message in response saying something along the lines of, "Okay, tomorrow when you clock in, you, me, and our boss are going to sit down and talk about this and how to prevent this guy from talking to you or coming into the store again." She also was very understanding and told me about a case a few years ago. The exact same thing happened to another young girl who worked there. It blew my mind, but it also kind of pissed me off because, like, this has happened 2 different times with 2 different guys and you still don't protect your workers? Never mind that. She gave me words of encouragement and said that I'm not alone and that all of us, my coworkers, are there to protect me. I went into work after my coworker spoke up about this to my personal manager in the store. She asked me all kinds of things about him, what he looks like, what he's been doing, and whatnot. The whole time she was very supportive and was disgusted by the owner's reaction to this. The whole team in the store gathered up together and we started speaking about countermeasures and how to move forward. He was banned from the store, and if he continues trying to get in, my coworkers will protect me and hide me. We also talked about not giving out any info about each other ever, though I thought this was very obvious. I'll also be escorted to my parents' car or to the bus by one of my male coworkers I have. We've had a long conversation about this, and I'm not sure what my manager said to the owner, but they seem to have turned around on the situation and see him as a total creep now. I also informed the police about this creep. They said that right now they can't do much about it because he wasn't doing any major stalking things, but at least they know what he looks like in this situation, which is important, I feel. This happened quite a few years ago. I had an affinity for this particular white substance in the form of lines back then. One very cold, stormy night around 11 p.m., I went for a walk to meet my dealer. I had never been to his place before, so he gave me the address to his small, 2-story apartment building with maybe 6 units in it. Upon arrival, I noticed several strangers inside. After they hit their pipes, 2 clearly unwashed guys came over to sit at the dining table while I waited for my G. I've never smoked anything besides weed and cigarettes. I was instantly uncomfortable. They tried making small talk, but I grew increasingly uneasy, giving only short, vague answers. I quickly paid for my stuff, grabbed my baggie, and got up from the table. That's when one of the guys offered to walk me home. My heart started to sink. Oh, I'm okay, thanks. I don't live far. Then the other guy stood up. No, really, we can walk you. We don't mind. We have to get going anyway. That's when my instincts finally kicked in. I became very aware and very scared. I immediately thought, I'm fully dressed and ready to go, but they still have to put their coats and shoes on. If I leave now, I'll get a head start and quickly disappear. They said something else as I headed to the door, but I pretended to take a phone call, waved goodbye to my dealer, and closed the door behind me. I jogged down the hallway and outside the door, and once I got outside, I ran for the street. I decided not to take the fast route home because from the building, they would be able to see me. I didn't want them knowing even the slightest direction I lived in. If they were really following me, the building was at the end of the street, so instead of going straight up the hill the way I came from, I turned right and started jogging. I kept glancing back and finally I saw them, about a block behind me, following me. The street I needed, Stanley Street, was across the intersection on my left, just another block ahead at a four-way light. As I approached the intersection, I noticed the corner house on my right. There is an older man sitting on the porch smoking. I recognized him. He was another dealer I had met only a few weeks before, when my usual guy was dry. I choked up as I got to his porch and asked if he remembered me. He did and asked, "What's wrong?" I told him I think those two guys are following me and asked if I could go inside for a minute until they passed. He didn't hesitate. We went inside, past the front living room and into the kitchen, where I explained what happened. He told me not to worry and that I was safe there and I could stay there as long as I needed to. Then we heard a knock at the door and I started to panic. He went to the door looking through the peephole and yelled, "Just a minute." He came back quickly and whispered that he knew the guys and that he was going to invite them in to have a hit. He told me to sneak through the back door, which was beyond the kitchen, go to the right of his yard, find the gate, and that would lead me to the street. He indicated to me to creep along the side of the house close to the shrubs and check the porch to make sure that they were inside. I followed his plan, and when the coast was clear, I didn't jog. I sprinted up Stanley Street and zigzagged all the way home. When I think back now, I'm in disbelief at my actions and how foolish I was. I thought I was invincible. I was far too trusting, but I truly thank God for the man who helped me that night. I don't know what those two guys wanted from me, but I'm forever grateful that I never had to find out. I live in a very small town where everyone knows everyone else. Last weekend, a girl walked up to my porch and said that she had a friend who wanted to get to know me and asked if I was single. I told her I was, and she asked for my number. I didn't see the harm in that, as I'm open to meeting new people. Big dumb mistake on my part. I'll never do that again. She left, and about 5 minutes later I received a text from this guy. And it turns out I have known of this person for almost 30 years, but we've never met or spoken to each other. He told me that he thought I was pretty, and that he would like to get to know me better. He asked if he could stop by and talk in person. I said that was fine. This guy shows up with four other people, and it was immediately clear to me that they were all on drugs of some sort. I hadn't seen him for a very long time, so I was not expecting how he looked. His name was Carey, and he didn't have a single tooth left in his mouth, and he might have weighed 110 pounds, 5'7" at most. I was immediately regretful. Not only were all his teeth missing, he had no job, no car, no money, and is currently homeless. I recognized immediately that this guy is trying to find a home for the winter, and he thinks he's gonna date me. It's obvious to me that he thinks very highly of his looks and his charming ways. Honestly, his flirting was extremely repulsive. I got rid of them by making up an excuse that I had to be somewhere. 4 days later, my doorbell cam captured a video of Carrie walking up my porch steps, where he decided to sit there with his back to the camera. He turned and looked directly at the camera twice. It gets creepier a few days later. I woke up Friday morning at about 5:30 a.m. and decided to smoke a cig. I don't smoke inside, and since I caught him sitting on my porch steps, I checked the camera for any sight of him. I didn't see anyone, so I stepped out and smoked. I was half asleep and staring down at the ground when I heard a voice. My head snapped up, and I'll be damned, he was standing less than 3 feet away from me. I nearly jumped out of my skin and screamed at him and said, "You just scared the fucking shit out of me. What the actual fuck is wrong with you?" I truly have no idea what direction he came from and how he was able to walk up to my porch without making a single sound. He laughed until he saw I was furious. Then he started explaining that he was here to tell me that his phone was dead and wanted to know if I had tried calling or texting him. The only text I sent him was asking him why the fuck he was sitting on my porch at 3:47 a.m. and he never answered that one. Leaning in towards me, trying to flirt with me, after creeping me the hell out, he says, "Good morning, sunshine." Oh, I wanted to slap his ugly face. I told him, "I'm not a morning person at all, so you need to go." He started explaining again why he was there, and then he started pouting and walked away very slowly, but kept turning back to me, looking at me like I was going to change my mind and invited him in or something. It was unbelievable. My doorbell cam actually recorded part of this interaction. After that, he started watching me from a half block away in front of a bowling alley that had a bench that directly lines up with my door. For 2 days, he watched my every move. It even started pouring rain and he just sat there watching me. I haven't seen him in a couple days, but I'm hoping he's moved on to someone else. But my intuition is saying he isn't done just yet. Cops know all about it. My son works for our sheriff department and filled them in. This is one of the creepiest encounters I've ever had, and I'm a paranormal investigator. I've always said that it's the living you gotta worry about, and this proves it. This is my story about being stalked. Dealing with this has been difficult, and throughout the ordeal, I felt out of control. So I'm sharing this to gain control over my own story. The story is long as it spanned over 2 years. Several years ago, I moved abroad to begin a 2-year study course. When I arrived at my apartment, I met 3 of my roommates. Sam was funny and sarcastic, while Bella and Poppy were both nice, sorority-type girls. We decided to go out for dinner, and I offered to invite the 4th roommate in room 1C next to mine. Sam warned me not to invite her, saying she was odd. I was worried because I didn't want to live with a bunch of catty girls. How are they fighting in less than 1 day? I smiled and told Sam that she just made a bad first impression, and I would invite her to get to know her better. Sam grumbled as I left the kitchen, approaching the door next to mine. I knocked on the door, and the door opened. A short, petite girl with long brown hair and a childlike face stuck her head out. I introduced myself and invited her for dinner. The girl's face lifted at my invitation, and she nodded in agreement. Our excitement for the new school year kept us lively as we arrived at the restaurant. I decided to befriend the girl in room 1C since we were sharing a bathroom. I learned that her name was Nellie. We were the same age, from the same state, and in the same program. I ordered a Jack and Coke as Nellie leaned in and asked me if I actually drank alcohol. I nodded, thinking her question was odd. We were both in our 20s. Of course I drank alcohol. Nellie focused her attention on me while we ate. As I got to know Nellie, I kind of felt bad for her. She was born in Sri Lanka, but immigrated as a kid, and since she had an accent and lisp, I assumed that she was bullied. Nellie was different from me. She was shy and claimed to not have hobbies or friends, but I figured that since we were in the same program, I could befriend her. I asked if she wanted to sit with me in class, and she happily agreed. I felt content knowing that I was befriending her, like I was doing a good deed. My first 2 weeks abroad went smoothly. I got used to my surroundings, made friends, and got along with my roommates. Sam, Bella, Poppy, and I would often cook and eat dinner together while we chatted about our days. Nellie and I got along, but she was socially awkward. I made it my goal to befriend her, which was easy because we sat together and lecture every day. We even opened our bedroom doors in unison. I would open my door, then Nellie would open hers and ask me where I was going. One night, I left my room to go grocery shopping when Nellie's door opened and asked if she could join me. I agreed and she hurriedly put on her sandals and her neon pink coat. I walked through the aisle. Nellie silently followed closely behind me. Eventually, I found everything I needed, but Nellie said that she wasn't buying anything. After I paid for everything and began to exit the store, the alarms went off. I stopped to show the security guard my receipt, and he looked at my bags, confirming I hadn't stolen anything. I didn't think much of the incident, but when I stood in the front of the store with Nellie for the fourth time as my bags got searched by security, a thought crept into my mind. The alarms never rang when I was alone or with friends. They only rang when I was with Nellie. I shook my head. Nellie couldn't be stealing. I was with her the whole time. She was a perfectly nice, normal girl, and I was rude to think the contrary. The harmony in the apartments only lasted 2 weeks. One morning, I shuffled into the bathroom and saw the toilet was completely full with 2 or 3 rolls of dry, unraveled toilet paper sprawled onto the floor. However, what concerned me most was the huge wad of hair that sat directly on top of the toilet paper. I knew then that it was Nellie who had done this. She was the only other person with a bathroom key, and her hair color was a match. I tried to think of any reason why she would do this. Maybe she clogged the toilet, then stuffed it with toilet paper to hide her business, but that didn't explain the wad of hair. I couldn't harp on the issue though, so I made a maintenance request to have someone unclog the toilet, and when I came home from class, the toilet was unclogged. I studied for 2 hours before going back into the bathroom. I was annoyed when I found the toilet clogged again, toilet paper, hair, and all. This obviously wasn't a mistake anymore, and now we were out of toilet paper. I knew I had to say something, but I didn't want to directly confront Nellie about this awkward topic, so I sent a passive, non-aggressive text. Hey, if something goes wrong with the toilet, can you make a maintenance request right away, please? I sent the message, carefully not making it accusatory. I didn't want there to be tension with Nellie, especially since she still sat with me in class. Nellie never acknowledged the situation. She still opened the door with mine, hung out with me, and sat with me in class. For the next 2 months, I just dealt with the constant toilet paper and torn out hair. I tried sending texts, but it didn't help. Nellie would clog the toilet. I'd make a maintenance request. The staff member would clean Nellie's mess. Then she would do it again. Eventually, after 12 clogged toilets, I was so annoyed that I decided to confront Nellie. Nellie, I know that you're clogging the toilet, and you need to stop. If you do it again, I'm going to report you. I pressed send and walked into class. I decided that I wouldn't sit with Nellie anymore. I had different friends to sit with who didn't clog my toilet. As I sat down with Reagan and Charlotte, I felt bad seeing Nellie sit alone across the lecture hall. I promised myself that I would still be friends with her and that everything would be fine. I was happy that the holiday break was soon, and Nellie never addressed me about not sitting with her. The message had worked. Nellie stopped clogging the toilet, and we were still friends. But I come home one day in early December and my nose scrunched in disgust. There was a sticky, sweet, rotten yogurt-like smell coming from Nellie's room. I didn't want to confront Nellie so soon after messaging her about the toilet, so for weeks I avoided the problem. I didn't address the issue until 2 weeks after, when all our food started to rot almost immediately after buying it. Bella, Sam, Poppy were complaining about how maintenance hadn't found the source of what was causing that food to rot. When I brought up the horrible smell and the accompanied fly infestation, the girls went to go smell the hallway outside of Nellie's room and returned 2 minutes later coughing and gagging. We posited about what was causing the smell when Sam brought up seeing Nellie at 2 a.m. skipping through the woods. Sam was heading back from a club and Nellie was skipping around like a possessed doll, according to Sam. After we spoke, Nellie entered the kitchen and everyone felt quiet. Sam bluntly asked Nellie what the smell in her room was, and Nellie just silently shrugged her shoulders. Annoyed by this, Sam stood up, grabbed Nellie's arm, and guided her into the hallway as the rest of us followed, covering our noses with our sleeve. Nellie claimed not to smell anything, but her eyes were darting rapidly between the three of us. Sam made a sarcastic comment towards Nellie as we returned to the kitchen without Nellie. Sam was a bit harsh, and a part of me felt bad for Nellie. At least Christmas would be relaxing. I spent 2 weeks at a friend's house with her family for Christmas. They were all welcoming, so I didn't miss home too much. My friend knew about Nellie, so she bought me some scented candles for Christmas. When I returned to the apartment, I felt rested and equipped to face the new year. My January exams were online and pretty easy, so I was surprised when Nellie texted me asking if I would cheat with her on the final exam. I politely declined, and she asked if I would go to lunch with her the next day. I had no plans, so I accepted her invitation. I spent a lot of time with her, but she never actually spoke much, so despite everything, I wanted to get to know her better. Once we were at the restaurant, I racked my brain for things I could talk to Nellie about. Attempting to break the awkward silence, I asked her what her favorite show was. She told me that she loves to watch Sophia the First. I was confused. Sophia the First is the Disney toddler show that came out when we were teens. Why would she be watching a show for toddlers in her 20s? I didn't know how to expand on what she said, so I changed the subject and asked her what her favorite hobby was. Nellie giggled and said, "I do this a lot actually. I listen to you through the walls. They're so thin, I barely put my ear against it. I hear you talk to your parents every day." I tried not to look horrified as I sat there confused and a little scared. Nellie then started laughing. "You're like a mother, but I'm an aunt and we're sisters together." I smiled awkwardly and nodded. I had no clue how to respond. In a desperate attempt to change topics, I asked her about her childhood in Sri Lanka. Nellie slammed her fist on the table, sending my rice flying off my plate. Nellie yelled that she was not from Sri Lanka, and I apologized, even though she definitely had told me that she was from there. Nellie began to laugh again. "I have plans for us tonight. We'll go to a graveyard and walk around. You'll be scared, but I'll have fun with you." Nellie's eyes were opened incredibly wide, and her mouth seemed to open more than usual. She was scaring me, and I didn't want to be rude, so I said I'll invite our other roommates too. At that, Nellie let go of her fork and quickly moved her hand onto mine. She insisted that we go alone. I pulled my hand back, attempting to hide the grimace, and stuttered out a disingenuous, "Maybe." Nellie leaned back slowly, rolling her head from one side to the other, and mumbled about how fun it will be. The rest of her lunch was silent. When we got back to the apartment, I said goodbye to her and went into my room. I didn't call my parents that night. I went to bed early, hoping to quell my anxiety and get some much needed rest. The next day I did laundry, went shopping, and by 2, I was meal prepping for the week. I jumped when I heard Nellie ask me if I wanted to go to the movies with her. I hadn't heard her come into the kitchen, but there she stood, her head down and her eyes turned up staring at me. I declined her request, but she repeated her question. I politely declined once again, trying to offset the bizarre vibe. Nellie didn't respond and retreated back to her room, then left for the movies. An hour later, I went to the bathroom, and when I opened the door, I gagged immediately. The smell was bad, but the sight was worse. The walls, floor, door, sink, and toilet were covered with smeared poop and blood. I could see distinct handprints. I closed the door, not trying to puke. I was shocked that Nellie had done this, but my shock turned into anger as I messaged Nellie. "What you did is weird and disgusting. You need to clean it. I'm going to report you." I pressed send. I no longer cared about being friends with Nellie. I felt gross, so I went to our shower room next to the bathroom, but Nellie ruined that too. There was toilet paper shoved into the shower drain and wads of toilet paper crusted onto the walls. I was livid at this point, but I had to wait until Monday to report her. So I laid down to take a nap. 2 hours later, I was awoken with Nellie slamming the front door. I heard footsteps until her feet were visibly on the crack under my door. I expected a knock, but she didn't. Instead, Nellie began to continuously chirp like a bird. She briefly paused, then began twisting my doorknob in unison with her chirps. I stood there unnerved as Nellie did this for 5 minutes. Then Nellie began to rapidly knock on the door and call my cell phone. 7 times she called, hung up, then called again while still rapidly knocking. Nellie then began to ram her body against my door over and over again. The shock of it all made me stumble back onto my bed. Then, as suddenly as it started, Nellie stopped. Her feet still visible under my door. My phone buzzed and I slowly unlocked it, staring down in horror at Nellie's text. "The cockroach screamed, 'Why do this to me? Because you couldn't be positive in a negative situation?' the doctor said. The doctor pulls off the cockroach's legs, and it cries. The doctor has no choice. The cockroach must be killed, and its family taken away. You are the funny cockroach." I was terrified as Nellie began to knock and chirp. I was scared to call the cops because I was on a visa, and if they didn't believe me, I could be deported for making false reports. I texted Poppy and Bella, who had heard everything. Nellie stood there for an hour straight, occasionally pushing her fingers through the crack under my door. When Bella's boyfriend arrived, his presence scared Nellie away. We met up and talked about what happened before going to bed. That night, I barely slept. I was too scared. I woke up the next day anxious from the previous night's events. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't that bad. However, as I peeked into the bathroom, its conditions suggested otherwise. Charlotte and Reagan were skipping class, so I sat alone. I saw Nellie enter the room, bypass her regular seat, weave through the aisles, and inspect each row as she passed. I sank in my chair as she got closer, horrified by the realization that she was searching for me. With last night's memories fresh in my mind, I froze in fear when Nellie found me and robotically bent down to meet my eyeline as she sat next to me with her mouth twisted in a sinister smile. I did nothing as she sat next to me, too scared to move and worried about any teeny shift may cause her to attack. When the professor dismissed us, I shot up, frantically packing my things up. Nellie asked where I was going, and I lied to her, saying I was going to a cafe. I didn't want her to know where I was. So I went home for lunch, and as I stood in the kitchen, the door opened. "You weren't at the cafe." Nellie's eyes darted up at me. She was looking at the knife on the table. I apologized and told Nellie that my plans had changed. My heart raced as I asked her if she liked the lecture. She didn't respond. She just stared with her head tilted and mouth agape. I asked her again, but she still didn't answer. I faced her, afraid that she would use the knife on me. She glared so intently that her veins were protruding. She stood there for 10 minutes before leaving. Later on, I walked to the library and froze when I saw Nellie's pink jacket behind me. I turned to see Nellie staring at me with vacant eyes. She followed me into the library, up to the 3rd floor, and sat directly behind me. With her threat still fresh in my mind, I moved to a different spot, but she followed me. I tried again, but she still followed. I was scared to be isolated in the library with her, so I decided to leave. I quickly weaved through the bookshelves, desperately trying to reach the lobby, but Nellie matched my pace. I was nearing a heart attack when I ran into my guardian angel, Sam. "Nellie's following me," I blurted out. Sam looked at Nellie, who had stopped 5 feet behind me. She nonchalantly told Nellie to fuck off. I was surprised when Nellie did just that. After Sam and I spoke for a bit, my phone buzzed. It was Nellie, inviting me to the graveyard that night. Sam told me that I'd be smart to move out, and she was right. I needed to report Nellie and move out. It wasn't safe for me to live in that apartment anymore. I needed to get away. I went to Reagan's apartment, as she was the closest person I had to family while I was abroad. She gave me refuge while listening to me retell the last 48 miserable hours of my life. She reassured me that I could stay with her, and as I held back tears, my phone buzzed. Sam texted me that she needed help and to go to the apartment ASAP. I was hesitant to go back there, but I just couldn't abandon Sam, so I grabbed my stuff and told Reagan I would be back soon. I walked to my apartment and stared up at it, feeling a lot like a priest in the Exorcist movie. When I got to my door, I was immediately greeted by my 3 roommates' distraught faces. I followed them into the apartment, and my eyes were wide as Sam opened the kitchen door to reveal a truly demonic sight. Huge amounts of congealed red and orange liquid pooled across the floor, leading beneath a table where a small bird lay dead, with its wings outstretched and its head missing. I felt sick. The windows don't open, so it didn't get here by itself. Nellie either found the bird and brought it into the kitchen, or she killed it and decapitated a living bird and then put it in the kitchen. I don't like either of those 2 options. I assured my roommates that I would report Nellie that night, and that's exactly what I did. I spoke to the school safety board, and things moved fast. I discovered that Nellie had lied about her name and age. Officials in hazmat suits came to clean the kitchen and Nellie's room. The board had me send them photos of myself daily in case Nellie killed me and they had to identify me. I quickly moved out, and since Nellie avoided the other girls, they decided to stay. I declined to submit Nellie for expulsion because I felt bad for her and thought that moving away would stop her obsession with me. I was completely misguided. I was happy that my new roommates were normal and no Nellie incidents happened for 2 weeks. I did have a large uptick in random daily Facebook and Instagram followers from blank profile users. I knew who was behind this, but I was avoiding any Nellie-related thoughts. I was having night terrors, and the more I thought about her, the worse they got. I blocked another user as I sat down with Reagan and Charlotte in an almost empty lecture hall. Charlotte nudged me as Nellie entered the room, bypassing her usual seat. I felt myself freeze up as she entered in our row and began walking towards me, staring at me with her dead eyes. "Don't fucking sit next to me," I said, shocked by my bravery. Nellie responded by sitting 10 seats down from me, not breaking eye contact, and I considered that a win. After class, I went home and then walked to the store. I forgot to grab a cart, so I quickly turned around to fetch one and ran into someone standing directly behind me. It was Nellie. Did she follow me from my apartment? Does she know where I live? My heart stopped as I backed into another aisle, and Nellie followed. I walked to another aisle, but Nellie followed me, matching my pace until I went into another aisle, and she began to run. I ran away terrified, and Nellie only stopped when I got to the security desk. Security offered to call the police, but I declined and gave them my email to send me the footage of Nellie chasing me. I had to report Nellie, but since I still had class that day, I decided to report her the next day. 2 hours later, as I waited for Reagan to walk me to my class, I caught Nellie staring at me from across the street, but she didn't approach me and walked with the crowd towards campus. Minutes later, Reagan found me and we headed to class together. I walked beside Reagan, passing the building and alleyways until a rock caught in my shoe and I bent over to fix it. Reagan switched to the right side of me to look at a billboard, and when I removed the rock, we began walking again. I turned my head to speak when Natalie jumped out of the alleyway onto Reagan. Her hands were outstretched and clasped around Reagan's neck. Words can't explain how terrified I was. Nellie let go immediately and Reagan grabbed my arm, walking forward. Nellie began walking shoulder to shoulder with me, her head turned sideways in an unnatural angle. The look in her eyes were not human. Reagan told me to run and we bolted across the street. Natalie paused, but walked away, traffic stopping her from crossing. We stopped and Reagan leaned against the fence as I bent over, covered my mouth, trying not to vomit. After a while, we continued our walk to class in silence. We made it to the lobby and headed down the staircase, but Nellie stood at the bottom of it. "I won't let her walk behind me," I said, voice shaking. Reagan nodded, and we followed a large crowd after Nellie walked upstairs, only to find her holding the door open for everyone. Nellie stared at me through the crowd until everyone but Reagan and I had passed through. "It's okay, you can go first," Reagan said while smiling at Nellie. I was shocked at how composed she was, and even more shocked that Nellie listened. We sat down in class and Nellie tried to sit behind me, but someone was saving the seat for his friend, so Nellie left. I didn't pay attention to the lecture. I sat there shocked and terrified while Reagan hunched low in her seat, rubbing her neck. I felt horrible for bringing Reagan into this Nellie crap. I knew then Nellie needed to be expelled no matter what. The next day I reported Nellie to the Student Safety Board and they raised the issue to the Disciplinary Board. I submitted a lengthy report detailing everything Nellie had done. I included Reagan, Bella, Poppy, and Sam as witnesses and gave photographic evidence of the threats, the calls, the smeared poop and blood, clogged shower and toilets, and the stalking. The next week, I met with the disciplinary board to go over their conclusions. They informed me that they had reviewed my report, met with Nellie to give her a copy of my report, discussed my accusations, and had come to a conclusion. They acknowledged that everything I reported was factual, but they didn't think that Nellie had any malicious intent, so they would grant a no-contact order, but Nellie would not be expelled. I was completely perplexed by their conclusion and asked them what Nellie had to say about this, but they refused to tell me anything. I was at a loss for words. I couldn't believe that Nellie was given my full report, knew everything that I said, and knew the witnesses' names. The school put us all in danger. Yet, they wouldn't allow me to know if Nellie had even denied her actions. I was devastated. I felt my mind go numb. I knew at that moment that they didn't care, that they were gonna prioritize a predator. So with no other options, I agreed to the no-contact order. The worker tried to get me to sign a non-disclosure agreement so I wouldn't speak about what Nellie had done to me or how the school dealt with my case, but I refused to sign it. The next day I received email confirmation that Nellie had agreed to the no-contact order, but I knew that meant nothing. Nellie wouldn't get help and she would never stop stalking me. My sophomore year was plagued with the relentless pattern of Nellie stalking me from place to place, sitting next to me in class, standing next to me in hallways, and staring at me daily. Her actions were so unnerving and obvious that multiple strangers warned me about her. I reported these incidents every time they occurred, and the school always responded by stating that they would remind Nellie of the no-contact order. They never took any further steps to help me. In sophomore year, Nellie found other roommates, and in them, next victims. She was evicted from an off-campus apartment, and her new roommates, who once sat with her, began to sit far away from her. They looked terrified. They looked like me. Having incidents happen weekly, and having to see Nellie daily made it impossible to move on. I was always in flight or freeze mode, terrified by what Nellie had done and what she still might do to me. I became a sunken in, miserable and defeated version of myself. I wanted revenge, a natural result of the boiling rage I felt, now at a constant simmer after Nellie was coddled by the university that failed to shell out even a minor consequence for the terror she imposed on me. I wanted her to suffer in the same way that she made me suffer. I knew if I had just grown a pair in those early months, I could have saved myself and others from suffering. Nellie was likely stalking me from the moment I met her. I just hadn't realized it, and it weighs heavily on me to know that I played a large part in my own suffering. No matter what I write, I can't begin to recreate the evil that radiated off of Nellie. I have daily night terrors. I don't go into new situations. I don't speak to new people, and I don't make friends. I'm not nice to strangers because I don't want something like this to happen again. Revenge came on graduation day when Nellie's name didn't appear on the book of graduates. She had failed second year, but despite everything, I couldn't help but think that I was a bad person for being content with her failing. Maybe I was just happy that I could finally move on. I came here to tell you my story because there are a lot of people that go through these types of relationships and who are maybe still healing. But I also need some advice. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and when I was 14, I liked older guys, and not guys who were only a year older than me. I mean 3 to 4 years older. That's when I met my ex. He was 17 at the time, and he was a really sweet guy until he started opening up about his mental health and drug addiction. Don't get me wrong, I don't judge him for being mentally unstable, but he never took his prescriptions and just threw tantrums all day, verbally abused me, and overall didn't care about me. I was with him for 2 years until one day he finally blocked me, basically ending our relationship, and I never heard from him since, until 2 months ago. I came from school one day and looked into the mailbox because I saw an envelope. It was unusual for us to receive envelopes unless it was a bill, but it wasn't an envelope for bills, it was one meant for letters. I put it in my purse and went inside the house. I went into my room after I said hi to my mom and opened the envelope. There was no return address or anything like that, but my name on the letter caught my attention. I never received letters from anyone, and I was worried to see a signature that I recognized on it. I started reading the letter. Well, hardly, because the writing was awful. But the person who sent it is telling me how they regret letting me go, and that they want me back. I thought it was one of my friends playing a stupid prank on me, so I brushed it off and put it in my drawer, laughing about the situation. Later at night, I was about to go to sleep when an unknown number showed up on my screen. I looked at this screen confused because I rarely receive weird calls from unknown numbers. I didn't really want to pick up, but I thought maybe it was one of my friends trying to pull another prank on me. I picked up and heard heavy breathing. "Hello?" I said. No answer. "Patrice, are you this bored that you want to pull pranks on me?" Still no answer. Just heavy breathing from the other end. All of a sudden, I heard a voice. "Who's Patrice?" My eyes were wide open, and I hung up. I stared at the ceiling in disbelief, and I put my phone on silent mode and just went to sleep. I didn't think that this one phone call was about to be the beginning of my biggest nightmare. I woke up the next morning with several calls, all from that unknown number, and I got a little scared. I opened my phone and saw messages from the same person telling me to pick up and just talk to them. I tried to ignore it, but the calls and messages continued even after I got to school. When I was outside the school gates and smoking a cigarette with my friend, I got a call again. I answered and gave an upset answer. "Dude, who the fuck are you? Why are you calling me?" The person sat in silence for a few seconds, then said my friend's name. My friend heard their name and asked who the fuck I was on the phone with. "You were with Anna, aren't you?" "Of course you are. I can see you." I looked around and didn't see anyone other than my other schoolmates. There were only 6 people around us and nobody was on the call or anything. I got creeped out and hung up. I think I recognized the voice, and it was my ex. I told my friend that he kept calling me and texting me from an unknown number since last night, and I didn't know what to do. She said that I can't really do anything about it, that I should just ignore the calls. As time went on though, I started getting more letters, sometimes even flowers right next to the fence of my home. For context, my ex was from another city, and I never told him where I lived. He knew what school I went to, but never which class I was in. Then I started getting a single rose on my desk once a week when I would get to school. My classmates told me that they never saw the person who brought me roses because they were there by the time they got to class. I was super paranoid. I started receiving pictures of me and my friends outside of the school gate, sometimes even when I was alone. I was shitting my pants whenever I saw that unknown number pop up on my screen with a picture attached to the message. I finally had enough one day and called his number, but he never picked up. I started texting him on the apps that I didn't get blocked on and told him to stop or I'd contact his boss and complain about his behavior and even make fake complaints about his service at work so that he'll get fired. He really needed the job, so he left me alone for a week, but then I started seeing him on the streets, in public transportation, and outside my school. Mind you, this dude lived in another country by the time we broke up and only came back when he started texting me again. I asked some of his friends about when he got back, and they told me he came back to our country the day that I started getting the calls. I could barely leave my house after I found out he knew my school schedule, and I always asked one of my classmates who lived nearby to pick me up with her car on her way to school. One day, I wasn't so lucky. My classmate who used to drive me to school was sick and couldn't show up, so I had to take the bus that day. When I got on the bus, I saw his blonde, wavy hair, and I froze. I literally wanted to cry and didn't know how to get out of the bus without him getting off at the same stop as me. In my country, we aren't supposed to talk to the bus driver while they're driving, but I had no other choice but to ask him not to let him out the bus. I explained the situation and he was thankfully understanding. He didn't let him off the bus. He was banging on the glass door and screaming to be let off, but the driver kept the door shut and drove off. I sighed in relief and started crying while I was waiting for the other bus to come. It's been a month since school ended and I haven't seen him after that, but I'm scared that he might come back when school starts. The police won't do anything about it, even though I started getting threatening letters 2 weeks ago. I carry a pocket knife with me and I've even changed my number, but I don't know what else I can do. I dated this man for about 2.5 years and he nearly killed me. Very physically abusive, emotionally, sexually, all of it. The last time he hurt me was because I told him I was moving and I was gonna have a roommate. He didn't like that. He strangled me twice and punched me in the face. I escaped and called the cops. He was arrested a few days later. Until then though, he was coaching me on how I needed to go back to law enforcement and state that I hit myself and he didn't really strangle me. That I stopped taking my psychiatric medicine and that I was having a psychotic break that night. At the first hearing, I recanted and told the judge all the lies my ex told me to. The judge believed me and he was set to get released from jail, but he was still under the state county hold or something like that. Before he was supposed to get released, I went back to law enforcement after gaining some clarity and told him the truth again, in which another hearing was scheduled. Undoubtedly, my ex was notified the reason why another hearing was being scheduled. He was a gang member. Obviously, I'm not going to say which one. And as previously mentioned, by now I had moved into a new house with my roommate. But before he got arrested, he asked me where I was moving, and I told him which street corner the house was on, very stupidly. Well, my roommate's boyfriend at the time was affiliated as well. We were with some real winners, huh? And he was apparently notified that my house had been marked by the gang members my ex belonged to, and that showed true. One morning around 6 a.m., my roommate and her boyfriend were sitting in the driveway in their car with the lights off. I was inside the house asleep. A car pulled up in front of the house, blocking the driveway, preventing my roommate from pulling her car out. We are still unsure whether or not these people initially knew there were people sitting in my roommate's car. The mystery car sat there blocking the driveway for a few minutes before a man got out of the passenger seat and began walking directly up the driveway to my porch. Luckily, my roommate's boyfriend had a gun on him, and since he saw the man walking towards the front door, he got out of my roommate's car and flashed his gun at the man. The man saw it and ran back to the car, which sped off. Maybe a few weeks later, I had driven to a gas station a few streets over after the sun had gone down. I was getting a vape or something. When I was walking back to my car, a man in the same car that was in front of my house pulled up next to me and started yelling something. I couldn't tell what he was saying before I just yelled back, "Shut the fuck up and leave me alone," thinking I was just being randomly catcalled. I got out of my car and went to pull out of the gas station, noticing his car sitting in front of the exit I was going to take and not moving. So I went out a different exit and turned back onto the street my house was on. I looked behind me and saw that he was following me. He waited for me to leave before he pulled out and followed behind me. I started going down different streets and he kept tailing, so eventually I freaked out and sped up real fast and made a quick impulsive turn that threw him off my tracks. I didn't go home. Another day I came home from work and saw that the window in our dining room that looks out to the backyard, the only window on the first story that doesn't have iron bars, had been tampered with from outside. It had a screen secured to it so that the window may be opened, and the screen had been ripped off. We reattached it and tried to replicate it by ripping it off ourselves, and it was hard. My roommate's boyfriend was able to, but we weren't strong enough. It would have taken a lot of effort to get that screen off. The last instance, my roommate's boyfriend and his friend had left our house to go on a walk. As they were walking back up to the house, they saw two men peeking through our other dining room window, trying to see inside. They noticed my roommate's boyfriend as he started yelling at them, asking what the fuck they were doing, and they scurried off. My ex's final hearing happened a few months ago, and I've gotten him locked up until 2036. I think maybe his fellow gangbangers have realized that a man locked up for the next 12 years is not worth risking their freedom over anymore, and I have since been left alone. Let's start with the basics. I'm a 26-year-old male, and I work at a blind store where I'm alone during all my shift. I work from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday. It's a very simple job most of the time, as I just look at the computer, do some customer service, offer quotes to the very few people that enter the store, and so on. So like I said, it's very boring and not much happens. But lately, something started to catch my attention. I noticed across the street someone looking directly at the store, more precisely looking at me. I don't handle cash at the store. We mostly work with credit cards and debit cards, so I don't think they were planning to rob the store or something like that. I noticed that there's a telescope on the window and it's pointed directly at my desk, so I think it's very obvious to say that the person is looking at me. I left my phone recording while I was at work for about an hour and a half, and I could see in the recording that this person moves the telescope once in a while, and that was when I would go to the restroom. The telescope moves while trying to find me. So yeah, I have not seen this person's face or anything, but surely enough, this is creepy. Update 1. Thank you so much for your comments and responses to this post. I didn't expect this to get any attention, so here goes with some more info about the situation and more details about the store. This person is looking at my desk through a door, so my blinds can't protect me. In addition to this, I moved my desk closer to the wall so the person can't see me anymore. I did this just because I'm getting video proof of this person's behavior. I just found out about the stalker this Tuesday, and I don't know if he or she has been doing this for weeks, and I just noticed it now. So I'm already being careful when I get off work. After reading all your suggestions, I've decided to go and have a little chat with the building administrator and show her all the evidence I have collected. I will do this today. I may update this in a week if something worth mentioning happens. If not, then Monday I'll update the post. Update 2. So I already showed the evidence to the building administrator. Let's call her Anna. And she was shocked. Even more when she actually saw the telescope showing through the window of the apartment. She told me that the apartment that had the telescope is being used by two girls, maybe in their 20s. And these two girls are weird. Their apartment is small, but they are not cheap. And these two girls started living there almost 2 months ago. She told me that she doesn't see these girls leave the apartment often, and most of the food and groceries are delivered to these girls via delivery drivers. But something that does occur is a man comes to the apartment every 2 or 3 days and leaves early in the morning. The man is the one that actually made the rental agreement and pays for the apartment, so he's probably paying for food and rent for these two girls. Now, Anna says when the rental agreement took place, the man said these two girls would be living there because they're in college, but she hasn't seen the two girls go to college or anything like that. So yeah, this is weird. Anna is going to speak about this issue with the owner of the building and the man who signed the rental agreement, so this activity stops. Last update. Okay, so this weekend, I didn't think too much about the situation anymore. I tried to enjoy my days off without worrying about my job. So just today I come to work, open the store door and begin to work. I then noticed that the window to the apartment was closed. This window was always open, and I noticed that the telescope was no longer there. I sent a message to Anna asking if she could tell me anything about these girls, and if something was being done about the stalking. Apparently, Anna, the building manager, and the mysterious man had a short conversation this Saturday. They called the man on the phone and asked him if he could talk about some complaints about the apartment. Then they told the man that the girls were harassing the stores in front of the building. Luckily, they didn't say it was me who was complaining. They told the man that this behavior should stop because that's not something tenants should do. So far, the man has been listening and paying attention to the requests. Everything was normal up to that point, but then the building owner had a question. It was a quick question. What career are they studying? Anna said that the man changed his attitude completely, said that he should mind his own business, and just left. Sunday comes, and the man calls Anna to give her the keys to the apartment. He didn't explain why or said anything else. He just gave her the keys and left. She was very confused and also worried about the girls, mainly because she didn't see them when they left. I told her maybe they left early in the morning, like the man used to. I asked if there was something wrong with the apartment, like missing stuff or damages, but Anna said everything was fine, nothing was stolen or broken. Also, I asked if she heard noises, yelling, or anything that Saturday night. Nothing, she says. She's thinking about filing a complaint with the police because it feels wrong that they would just leave like that. If you ask me, I think the reason why they left was because the building owner asked about the girls. I don't know what to think about this. If Anna does end up going to the police, I will probably provide my testimony or something, if it's helpful. I hope I don't have another update to this post, because I wouldn't want to know more about this than I should. I'm a 29-year-old man from the Philippines, and even though this incident occurred back in 2013, over a decade ago, I still find myself haunted by it every time I return to my hometown. At the time, I was just an 18-year-old college student. It was the night of our department's socialization party, which had wrapped up around midnight. As the only one among my friends with a car, I had always taken the role as the designated driver. After dropping my friends off at their homes, I was in my usual parking spot, just a few houses away from my own, due to the limited parking in our area. As I was about to exit my car, I noticed a girl standing near the entrance of an alleyway leading to my house and several others. She was wearing a shirt with our department's logo. I assumed that she had just been walking back from the party. In front of her, I see a man in his late 20s, clad in a hoodie, standing ominously, seemingly blocking her path. The girl locked eyes with me, and I immediately recognized her expression. It was a silent plea for help. Instincts kicked in. I grabbed my bag and stepped out of the car. The man, noticing my presence, began to walk into the alleyway. When I reached the girl, he had vanished out of sight. I felt as though whatever threatening situation that had occurred moments before was over, and I was tempted to walk away. But then I caught sight of the strange man again. He was leaning against the wall of a nearby house, his gaze fixed on me. A chill ran down my spine, and just then, the girl called out from behind me. Her voice trembled with fear, and I saw her approach very shaken. "Can you walk with me to my apartment at the end of the alleyway?" she asked, explaining that the man had been silently blocking her way. I glanced back at the man. He appeared intoxicated, perhaps drunk or on drugs. We began to walk, our breaths shallow as we passed him. After putting some distance between us, I glanced back. To my horror, he was following us. We had already passed my house at this point, but I couldn't leave this girl to face him alone. As fear coursed through me, she suddenly broke into a full sprint, and I had no choice but to keep pace with her. We reached the gate to her apartment. She hesitantly swung the door open, slamming it shut behind us. We dashed into the building where our second gate stood, this one smaller, likely designed to keep pets from escaping. She opened it, and I slipped through just as the sound of the man approaching the first gate reached our ears. We bolted upstairs, making our way to the third floor, breathless. The girl knocked urgently, but softly, at her apartment door. After what felt like an eternity, it swung open, revealing her friends, a guy and a girl around her age. They looked bewildered but quickly locked the door behind us and led us to the bedroom. They turned off the lights and we sat there silently, with our hearts pounding. The girl broke down in tears, recounting the terrifying events to her friends. She revealed that the man had been following her for about 10 to 15 minutes, and she expressed relief at having seen me. Unsure of what to do next, I called my aunt, who was staying at my house for the night. Thankfully, she answered swiftly. I urged her to call the police. At this time, we could now hear the man pacing around the apartment, seemingly looking for us. He was mumbling something, but we couldn't hear well from the other side of the door. A few minutes later, my phone rang with an unknown number. It was my uncle, a policeman, reassuring us that help was on the way. What felt like hours dragged on, and eventually, the police arrived. My uncle instructed me, via phone, to come downstairs and recount the ordeal to the officers. They informed us that they had seen a man wandering around the gate and eventually into the far end of the alleyway. Once police had finished their inquiries, they allowed me to go home. I recounted the entire story to my aunt, who urged me to get some rest. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me as my mind raced with thoughts of the strange man. What if he would have caught up to us, armed with a knife or some weapon? I fought to dispel the terrifying images racing through my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he might be watching me in the dark, a knife glinting menacingly in his hand. I saw another post on the sub, and it made me think about this weird dude I met last year. So I decided I wanted to do a little story time, because I totally forgot this happened to me a bit ago. I'm 20 now, and this happened in like October or November, so not even a year ago. I was homeless and couch hopping with friends, or sleeping in my friend's car, drinking a lot, etc. One of my friends met this dude in the same neighborhood who they do deals with. This neighborhood is known for old crackheads, basically. He was a bit younger, but looked like he definitely dabbled in some hard drugs. Sunken face and eyes, with scabs on his face. He was generous and welcoming though. He was obsessed with his cat, so I thought he was an innocent guy. Her boyfriend, and I think one or two more people and I go to chill and drink at his house. Cool dude, little weird, but he was alright. I can get along with weird people. A few hours rolled by, and everyone's ready to go home, and my friend asked me where I needed to go for the night. I, of course, didn't have a plan. I never did. He then offered to let me stay there after hearing my situation. I said yes very hesitantly, because for some reason my skin crawled when he offered. I don't know if it was intuition or what. My friend then insisted and said I should stay there, but didn't have anywhere else. I then agreed, and everyone left. He yapped my ear off about spiritual things that didn't make sense. He then said he was going to bed and offered me to sleep in his room. I walked into his room to check it out, and he had a daybed that pulls out another bed at the bottom. So I was like, okay, I don't have to sleep with him. This could work. Also, I forgot to mention this was a trailer home that was not kept up with well. Dishes were nasty, piling up, attracting all sorts of bugs. Counter covered with resin, tobacco, soda, just looked like they'd never been clean. The living room was clean, but that was it. He started to clean off the clothes on the upper part of the bed so that he could lay there, and then stopped and was like, never mind, we can both sleep on the bottom one. I looked at him and said, I think I'll sleep on the couch if it's okay. He insisted that it was okay and that he wasn't going to be weird, and he was acting like a little kid begging me to buy him a toy. I insisted on sleeping on the couch. He got a little upset and laid on his bed. Then like 30 minutes later, he says from the other room something like, you know what, this is kind of weird. Maybe you shouldn't stay here. He proceeds to say that he needs to be alone, and I'm like, dude, it's 3 a.m. You're whining because I won't sleep in the bed with you. I don't know you. Then he kept on insisting on me sleeping in his room with him. I kept declining and said I was going to sleep. He says fine, but he's kicking me out in the a.m. That was totally okay with me. Morning comes around and he wakes up and makes pancakes. I then asked him if he could drop me off at work since I was working in the morning. He said yes and acted like nothing happened the night before and started yapping my ear off again about spiritual bullshit. As it's time to bring me to work, we leave his house and he drops me off at work. I work all day, and while I was still at work at night, he somehow got my number from someone and texted me. He said something like, hey, I got a case of beer and some weed if you want to come over. I said I had plans. He then texted me and said, you told me that you would hang out with me later. I never said that, so I ignored him. He texted me a couple more times with a, hello? I ignored all of them and didn't think of him or see him again. Fast forward, I think a week or two later, this man comes into my job and asks someone for a job interview. I recognized him and was very scared and did not want him working with me at all. He gets an interview from my manager somehow, and he leaves. My coworker came up to me and was like, hey, you see that weird dude that just came in? I mentioned that I somewhat knew him and that he is in fact very weird. He then brought up that maybe he was trying to stalk me. This was a joke at first, and we laughed about it, and he continued his work, but he did tell the manager what I had told him, and just in case, the manager emailed him immediately saying he wasn't hired, which I was relieved. Then, I shit you not even an hour later, this kid comes back to my job with a different outfit on. He asked for a job interview. This time he was looking all around the place, all sketchy, and then I ran into the bathroom because now I think this man is stalking me for real. Thankfully, the first person that saw him was my coworker, who I was just talking to, and thank God, he seems to be a smart and protective man, because he tells the creepy guy that had just came in an hour ago that he already got an interview, and they didn't hire him, and needed to get the fuck out. He left, but not without a bit of arguing. After I got out of the bathroom, my coworker gave me the rundown on what happened, and said that the guy was definitely bad news. He told me to never go near that guy again, and I haven't. I don't know what could have transpired from that, but it probably wasn't anything good. I grew up in a small town, primarily Hispanic. Everyone knew everything. We had some things here and there, of course, but other than that, not too much stuff happens here. I'm overweight, to put it simply, and not to the standards of beauty, really. I remember reading a meme online once where they joked about, "Can't catch me or kidnap me since you can't carry me. Keep eating cake," and laughed at that, and was like, so true. God, I didn't realize how that would come back and bite me. I believe I was 19, and it was nighttime. My weed plug was doing a stash and dash, and being broke and desperate, I went for it. I figured, I grew up here, I know all the areas. What made this more tempting is it's actually not far from my area at all. So I said, fuck it. I was on a video call with my boyfriend and told him I was going for it. He stays on the phone with me as I head out. Mind you, it's late. The areas I have to cross are not well lit, and I left with nothing on me. Not even my taser, alarm, and pepper spray that my dad made me have. Oh, and what makes things worse, I snuck out because I didn't want my dad to know I was hunting for weed. So this was already starting out great. I set off. I have to cross the railroad tracks to get to the area, which was pitch black. Only the main road in the distance lighting it up, and some lights from warehouses nearby. But other than that, it was hard to see. I make my way towards the main road and notice a semi parked on the side of the road. Not unusual, semis park there all the time, so nothing weird. Then I hear a, "Hola, hey." I look over and see a man in a semi-truck. He looked generic. A Mexican man with a red long sleeve. He looked like any other man I'd see around town. But his smile, I don't know, he was just off. I waved, being polite. He gestures for me to come over and start speaking in Spanish, but I don't know Spanish. I know what you're thinking. 1. Why don't you know Spanish if you grew up in a Hispanic town? And 2. Why aren't you running? My parents never taught me. Sue me. And 2. He was far away, so I kept walking. I just sheepishly respond that I don't speak Spanish. I said this in Spanish. I learned the phrase just to say it to people. I wave him off, quickly walking away. My boyfriend asks me, "Who's that?" I just tell him some random semi-truck driver. I go on with the night. I think I've been out for 40 minutes at this point, and I realize I'm not gonna find it. Big sad. So I start heading home, still on the phone with my boyfriend. I keep talking to him, and my phone is dying, which is actually what made my boyfriend tell me to just go home. So I start to walk back. I go down the road and look down the pitch black area where the railroad is, and I stop. I just had a bad feeling. Something told me not to go home just yet. I tell my boyfriend I'm gonna look at the other end of the street that was towards where the warehouse was, giving off light. Past the empty trailers partially hidden by the shadows, I start walking into the light and I hear movement behind me and, hey. I turned around hella quick and saw the same semi-truck driver with the same smile he had. He came out from behind the trailer he was hiding behind. He had his right hand tucked in his pocket and was posturing his body in a way where he was hiding whatever he had. He told me to come here and started getting closer to me. I immediately tell my boyfriend to wake up his dad and come get me. I backed up quickly and was trying so hard to think. He saw that I was on the phone and immediately had a mad and annoyed look on his face. He stopped and actually began hiding behind the trailers, so I booked it down the road, telling my boyfriend to come get me or have his dad come get me. I didn't want to call my dad because even at that moment, for some reason, I was still terrified of getting caught sneaking out. I ran across the main road to this little mini mart across the street and hid behind the ice machine. I told my boyfriend I needed to call someone and hung up on him. I called my friend, who thank God was out with his girlfriend. I tell him I'm in danger and need him to come get me. Then I tell him where I'm at. While I was waiting for them, I stayed behind the ice machine and saw his semi. I saw him look around for me and shake his head in disappointment before driving off. Even in that moment, I didn't feel safe, not until my friend pulled up. Everything hit me once he got out of the car and I hugged him crying. He and his girlfriend calmed me down and took me home. I got a lecture from my boyfriend, but I'd rather take that lecture than anything else. I was lucky, way too lucky. The false sense of security my weight and looks give me really shattered after that, and I'm glad for it. It terrifies me to think of how things could have turned out if I didn't have my boyfriend on the phone with me. So semi-truck driver, let's not meet. I never want to see that smile ever again. This happened to me about 2 or 3 years ago. When I was 16, I used to work at a fast food restaurant and lived in a place where we have all seasons. At this point, it was winter, so it got dark pretty early, around 5 or 6 p.m. I was called to come into work this particular day, but the weather was kind of bad, causing us not to have any customers. As a result, we had to close the store early. It was about 5:30 p.m. when my manager left, locking the store and making me wait outside for my ride. About 20 minutes had passed since she left, and I was really cold, so I decided, regrettably, that I would walk to my friend's house just a few blocks away, about a 10-minute walk, and wait for my ride there. The store I worked at was on a busy street that was near a residential neighborhood. As I walk away from the store, I start walking down the residential street behind the store. I was walking on the sidewalk to the left of the street, as there was only one sidewalk on the right side of the street. If I walked on the right sidewalk, I'd only walk on it for a block, and then I would have to walk the rest of the way on the road. There were also woods on that side of the road. It was convenient as well because the left side of the street was my store and there were no streetlights. I walked about 3/4 of the block when I got this feeling that I was being watched. The neighborhood was really dark at this point, and I had pretty much reached the end of the block and was getting ready to cross the street when I noticed a silhouette of someone walking on the right side of the street near the woods. They were about 5'9" to 5'10" and looked to be maybe 180, 200 pounds. I couldn't make out any features though. I'm the type of person who's very aware of my surroundings and slightly paranoid, as I've been followed, almost kidnapped, stalked. You get the gist. So when I notice him, I stop walking and immediately get a sick feeling in my stomach. The man then noticed me and proceeded to walk slowly and yelled out to me. He says, "Yo, come here, I want to talk to you." I say back, "No, I'm good. I'm only 16. Then I turn around and start walking back to the store. He continues to yell things at me, trying to convince me to come to him. At this point, something in me told me to run, and I did just that. As I'm running, I know I shouldn't have, but I turned my head to see if he was actually chasing me or not, and to my horror, he was. So I turned up the speed and ran as fast as I can. Thankfully, as I reached the store, my ride pulled up, so I ran to the car. As I tried to get in, the door was locked. It took about 20 seconds for them to unlock the car, which felt like hours. Eventually, I got in and just broke down crying. Not gonna lie, I was kind of out of shape, so my back was hurting from breathing so hard, and I was all frazzled. This was the first time I was chased on foot, and let me tell you, it's way more scarier, surreal, and intense being chased on foot than someone chasing you in a car. Still to this day, I've added trauma from this incident, and it makes me hard to go anywhere by myself, especially in the dark. So to the man that chased me in the dark, let's not meet again. My friend and I'll call him Robert, had just spent a day in the city a few hours away from our own. We had just spent a day at an event in which we both participated in, and we had a blast. After the event, we decided to go out and get dinner with a group of our friends and ended up staying in the city almost until midnight before we decided that we probably should get going. The drive home was very uneventful for most of the way home. The roads in between the two cities were very rural and only had a few small towns between the two. Since it was dark, we spent most of the time driving, looking out for animals that may run out into the road while chatting with each other. As we got fairly close to Robert's house, we saw a car parked on the opposite side of the road, facing the wrong way, and a man walking around on the next side of the road. The car in front of us just happened to be an ambulance, which stopped to try to help the man. As we drove past, I made eye contact with him, and we just continued on our way, thinking nothing of what just happened. We drove for another 20 to 30 minutes before turning onto an access road to get to Robert's house. As we got further up the road, we noticed another car had turned on the road further behind us. Robert lives in a gated community, so we had turned onto the driveway so we could get through the gate. This is when we noticed that the car that had turned before had turned again and was right behind us. As we pulled up to the gate, Robert opened it and drove through. The car behind us also managed to make it through just before the gate closed. Neither of us really had any thought that we were being followed until this point, but even then we joked about it. We then drove for a while inside this neighborhood, which is fairly large, and noticed the car was still behind us. The route we took was a large curve, so we figured he should have had to turn off by now. As we got close to his house, we decided to keep on going, as the road would loop around and confirmed that we were being followed. At this point, we called my friend's dad, who had just watched us drive by with his car behind us. As we came around the loop, we had come to the realization that we were actually being followed. Robert then started driving much quicker through the neighborhood, and the car behind us also picked up speed. We were going about 50 to 60 miles on this fairly small road, but the other car kept up. We drove for a while before we decided to head to the front gate, which had a 24-hour security guard. We left the neighborhood, pulled a U-turn back to the front gate. We were still driving fast at this point, and to anyone it should have been apparent that we were being chased. As we came back to the front gate, my friend was able to open it in a way we couldn't be followed. But as we turned the corner, we saw the gate opening, and the car that was following us drove in. This is where we made a huge mistake. We turned down a road without realizing it's a cul-de-sac. As soon as we noticed our mistake, Robert was able to flip his car around so we could get out of there. But as we drove by the car, I made eye contact with the driver, but could barely see his face. When we turned out of the cul-de-sac, we turned off the lights and booked it. We finally had managed to shake him and get to Robert's house. We waited at Robert's house for the police to arrive, and shortly after the officer had arrived, he got a call on the radio and booked it to his car. A few minutes later, 2 more police showed up, and we were informed that they found the car. The man was the same guy that we passed on the side of the street around an hour earlier. When the police first made contact with him, he refused to speak to them and didn't look like he was in the right state of mind. As the traffic stop proceeded, he began threatening the officers. We later found out that he was a mentally ill and unstable veteran from a couple states over, and he had no reason to be anywhere close to where we were. The man had broken the back gate when he followed us in. The worst of all this is the guy at the front gate, whose only job was to not let people in if they didn't have a fob, without stopping at his booth, let the guy in after he saw us speed past him. He was quickly fired by the security company. Looking back, there's only one thing I would have changed. I would have called the police sooner, but the adrenaline in the moment clouded our judgment. Okay, this may be a long story, but I'm ready to tell people on Reddit my story of Let's Not Meet. The first started when I was in my first year of sixth form. My friend, let's say her name was Candle, she introduced me to her friend. Let's call her Amanda. I chatted with Amanda for the next 2 weeks simply because she used to message me constantly. She seemed like a nice girl at first, until she made me feel uncomfortable around her, as she used to message me, "I want to cuddle you like a big teddy bear," and similar things to that. I shot that down. She got upset and threatened to call the police on me if I didn't go on a date with her. I'm a gay guy, by the way, but I wasn't out of the closet at this point of my life. I screenshotted everything she said to me, and I showed my friend Candle, and she stated, "Yeah, I believe you. She's a compulsive liar. She lied about her teacher sexually assaulting her, and used to make things up to make her sound better than everyone else." I was so glad Candle believed me and advised me to block Amanda, which I did. Fast forward 2 years later, I was in college now and encountered her again. I didn't recognize her and was chatting to her without realizing that she was the same Amanda from 2 years prior. That was until I messaged Candle on Facebook, as Amanda told me that she knew Candle. Candle sent me a long paragraph. You do realize that's Amanda, right? Then it all came flooding back to me. She was right. It was the same girl who threatened to call the cops on me for not going on a date with her. She was dating a friend of mine in college, now my bestest friend. I tried to warn him, but he didn't listen to me. Amanda claimed to have a crush on me the second time. I shot it down right away and told her I'm not interested. She obviously took offense to that and threatened to call the police again, to which I replied, "What's police gonna do? This isn't a police matter." Which, by the look on her facial expressions, angered her even more, but she walked off. A couple of weeks go by. I ended up telling my friend about what she's been messaging me, and he obviously believed me as he saw her messages in real time. She kept asking me to go on a date and saying she liked me since day one. But here's the thing, she was in a relationship with my friend. Naturally, my friend got upset and called her right in front of me. She claimed that she had no idea what he was talking about and told him I was making up lies. Then he forgave her as she admitted it was true just a week later. To my annoyance, she began hanging out with us. I was nice to her because I didn't want to get my friend upset. She tried telling me that she had 2 children at 17, with one being 13 and the other one being 3. I thought that was odd. How is she 17 and having a 13-year-old child? She would have been 4. Something wasn't adding up. She stated that she was sexually assaulted when she was young. I should have called her out, but my friend was there, and I didn't want to upset him. She even stated that the 3-year-old child was my friend's daughter. Even he looked confused, like it was the first time he heard about this child. When she went home, I asked him. He stated, "No idea. She's never mentioned the child before, and we definitely never had sex. Very strange." Fast forward a year, and I was working in a shop. She suddenly showed up and asked to speak to me. My manager let me go on a 30-minute lunch. She was there with her friend, and she wanted to tell me that my best friend, let's officially give him a name, Marcus, was manipulating her and was always hurting her, which I knew for a fact wasn't true. Marcus wouldn't hurt a fly, but I listened to whatever else she wanted to say. She said that she was trapped in a relationship with him, and she felt scared of him. No idea if she was telling me this knowing that I did not like her. I made it seem like I believed her and headed back to work. I came home and FaceTimed Marcus and told him everything she was saying earlier that day. He started crying his eyes out because he found out she cheated on him with another guy. A friend of his showed a picture as proof and forwarded it to me. It was definitely a picture of her and some guy kissing on a bus. I told Marcus he needs to get away from her ASAP, which he did, until the next day they were back together as he yet again forgave her. We started doing group video chats, me, Marcus, and Amanda, at her request. And remember the 3-year-old from the year prior? Well, now she's 5 years old, called Lily, who literally never existed. I asked her about the 13-year-old she mentioned, and she replied with, I don't have a child other than Lily. The next couple of months go by, and she used to say, Lily's in bed, or Lily's in school, etc. When I would call her out to show us Lily, she would turn on the camera to a pitch black area of the bedroom and quickly put the camera back to her. I thought this was odd and said, Why'd you move the camera so fast? We didn't see anything. She replied, because she's camera shy, or she's asleep. I couldn't take this anymore. It was excuse after excuse. If Lily was Marcus's daughter, he deserves to see her, as he's literally never met or seen this Lily, not even once. I sent her a long message stating that Lily does not exist. Why no pictures of her? Then I blocked her because I had enough of her playing games with my best friend. She then went on people's Facebook, and I kid you not, she took photos of random people's children and claimed them as Lily. Marcus and I looked at each other, as we knew these were different pictures of random kids. Some of them weren't even girls. This went on until one day me and Marcus went to Amanda's mother's workplace, and Marcus showed her all the messages, especially the ones about this Lily, and the many pictures of her and some random guy she met up with. Some of the men Amanda met up with were like 50 or 60 years old. We found her on the dating website asking for men to fatten her up. We showed everything to Amanda's mother. Her mother was furious. She said Amanda never had kids. She was never sexually assaulted as a child, and knew something was odd as she had gotten into a random man's car just the day before. I thought this would be the end of Amanda, but I couldn't be more wrong, as Marcus, like an idiot, met up with her that evening and forgave her for the millionth time. And then something strange happened the next day. Marcus called me on FaceTime and he was furious at me. I asked him what's going on and what did I do. He told me I was a bad friend and he wants to cut me out of his life. I was in shock. I heard Amanda laughing in the background, then it clicked. She said something about me which wasn't true, and now me and Marcus were arguing like crazy. He blocked me on everything, which broke my heart, as this boy was my best friend, and now he's believing his compulsive lying girlfriend over me. Marcus and I were having on and off arguments all the time, and Amanda was the root of it, telling him lies and manipulating him, as if she was jealous of our friendship. Maybe she thought I was a threat to her relationship with Marcus and tried to split us up as best friends. She literally used to invite me out with them, and when I would turn up, she used to be like, I want to spend time with you. Why is he here? Excuse me? You're the one that invited me. This happened every single time until one time I slapped back at her, which made her cry. But I didn't care. She needed to stop doing this to me, as it wasn't healthy for my mental health. A few weeks go by. Marcus was texting me on Facebook Messenger, and we were having a laugh like we used to. He went to the toilet as he was at Amanda's. Then I suddenly got a text from Marcus saying, Hi, it's Amanda. I replied with, Hey, and then she started sending me threatening messages saying, I need to leave Marcus alone. He doesn't like me, and I need to move on. I was like, what the fuck? I ended up arguing with her over this, saying why the hell is she using his phone to send me these messages? Amanda was like, I dare you to come say that to my face. At this point, I had enough of this and contacted a friend of mine, let's call her Jasmine, and told her the situation as I ended up in tears on the phone. I've known Jasmine since primary school, and we had been close friends since. So naturally, she got defensive and asked me to get in her car and she'll drop me off wherever they were so I could say it in her face. Jasmine wanted to hurt Amanda for what she's done to me. We saw them and we confronted them. Marcus genuinely had no clue until I showed him the messages Amanda sent me on his phone. He was furious and walked off in tears. I ran after him, leaving Amanda and Jasmine alone. Marcus and I hugged it out and we talked about what happened. He was telling me that he wasn't allowed friends anymore, and Amanda even made him choose between her and his family, which made me even more furious. I had enough of the way she was treating my best friend. The next day, Jasmine messaged me and said that she cannot be friends anymore, as I was bullying Amanda for months, which wasn't true, as I wouldn't bully anyone. I said to Jasmine, if she was my real friend, she would know that Amanda was lying, but she didn't. To this very day, I never saw Jasmine again. This felt like a big betrayal of our friendship, and I really would never talk to Jasmine ever again. This was over 6 years ago now. Marcus and I were getting better, and he wasn't letting Amanda manipulate him anymore. This was until these boys came into our lives. Well, first, it was another girl I was friends with called Alice. I've known Alice for years and invited her out with me and Marcus to a pub for a few drinks. It was a nice evening, and Alice even called Amanda and told her that she needs to leave Marcus alone. We were drunk. That evening, we say our goodbyes, as I'm naturally worried for Marcus, as he's like a little brother to me at this point. Alice asked if I was gay, which I am gay, but I wasn't out of the closet at this point, so I responded with no. Then Alice said, "Then why are you worried about Marcus? You obviously fancy him." I tell her, well, no, he's like a brother to me, and we've been through a lot because of Amanda, so I obviously do care about him. I thought to forget about this conversation, as I assumed she was just making conversation. Alice messaged Marcus, asking him out on a date on a messaging app, and by the end of the week, they started dating. I was happy that he was moving on from Amanda. Boy, was I wrong. I started receiving messages from Alice's brother and his friend, stating to slice my throat and messaging Marcus to help them beat me up. We were talking to joining a group video call. The call contained me, Marcus, Amanda, and Alice's brother and his friend. They said horrible things towards me, saying that I should die and I hurt women, which wasn't true. It was more of Amanda's lies, and I was messaging Marcus to back me up because he was being quiet while I was trying to defend myself against these guys. He just read the messages and still sat there, saying nothing. At this point, I had enough and just left the call and left the group and blocked a lot of them apart from Marcus. Marcus called me the next morning saying that he's sorry for not defending me. I replied with, well, that isn't good enough. They were literally threatening me. Marcus went quiet, then said sorry again, but by this point, I ended the call because I couldn't be bothered with the stress anymore. Next thing I know, Alice was denying that she ever dated Marcus and claiming I made a fake account of her on the messaging app. Are you serious, mate? I also noticed Alice being besties with Amanda on Facebook, so that was the puzzle fitting. At this point, I wanted to end my life. I was at my lowest. I was losing all my friends because of this Amanda. This was the start of my depression getting worse and worse. Marcus and I eventually made up and we were best friends again, but there was a time period where we didn't talk for over a year. I guess that was me trying to move on with my life, but eventually we started talking again and Marcus and I met up again, just the two of us. He was saying how sorry he was for everything he's done. I said it was okay, he was under Amanda's control. Fast forward to 2024, Marcus has a new fiancée who is a lovely girl, and I'm going to be the best man at his wedding, because I stopped him from jumping every time Amanda cheated on him. I was always there for him. He now sees that I was always there for him and we're closer than ever. He even defends me a lot more nowadays and always has my back. I've seen Amanda here and there a few times, but don't acknowledge her, or them, as Amanda is now non-binary, which I don't believe, as it could just be another lie for attention, but I'm not judging. If that's how they feel, that's up to them, but that doesn't change the person who nearly destroyed my life. Last time I saw Amanda was last year at Pride. They are pointing at me, showing their current boyfriend who I am. I didn't notice until my other best friend, not Marcus, pointed it out to me. That was the last time I ever saw her, and hopefully we never meet again. There's a lot of missed out on this story, as it happened over a couple years, but I just want to say, Amanda, let's never meet ever again.